Standing up in McKinney, this is According to Callis, episode 652, coming to you on the 11th of June, the year of our Lord, 2024. Today we're going to talk about who the battle belongs to. In case you're wondering, the battle belongs to the Lord. But before we get there, before we talk about what that means and what our responsibility is, let me just take a moment to remind you. Every post that I put out has an opportunity to meet 1,000 people or 100,000 people. The only way that number grows or gets better or makes an impact is with your help. You're liking it, you're sharing it, you're reposting it, your involvement. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for much time. Take 30 seconds out. If you see a post or if you see a new episode out, do me a solid. Share it. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your enemies. Doesn't really matter. That's what makes the difference. That being said, I do appreciate the feedback. And when I say feedback, I mean constructive feedback. I'm not looking for somebody to just come in and, run their mouth. That's not constructive. If you do it, that's fine. I'm not going to get mad. I understand. It's part of the game. No big deal. But if you have something constructive, if you have something to add, I'm all ears. This podcast is based solely on my opinion, my understanding of events, and my point of view. Hence the name, According to Callis. So occasionally that means I'm going to get something wrong. Or occasionally that means I might color it a little bit more than what you're comfortable with. That's okay. And if you want to comment on that or be involved in that, you can join me over at your social media of choice. Because guess what? I've got a page and I've got a group at Facebook. I am a pro at Gab, and I still drop in at MeWe. And for now, you can still find a lot of my episodes over at YouTube. This is my passion project. This is the way that we get a message out, the way that I can prove to be a cheerleader without being a cheerleader. You wouldn't want to see me in a skirt and you never, just trust me. There's a reason why pretty young girls are cheerleaders and old guys like me are not. That being said, the real underlying conceptual thing here is we are looking at an oligarchy. They run our news. They run the social media, they run the networks, they run the movie houses. They control the vast amount of data, news, and entertainment and information that we all get. It's only little guys like me that show up, throw something out there, and leave it into the great wide space of the internet for other people to pick up on. Part of the reason why I say I'm a cheerleader, or why I take that position, is we have a lot of amazing possibilities and opportunities that never existed before in time. We are put on a somewhat level playing field to where we can interact with the big guys. My only regret is I wasn't smart enough to start doing this back in 2010 or 2012 or 2014. You see my drift here? I wish I could go back in time and set aside the time necessary in order to make something like this work. But I can only work with what's now. So the way we do that is we work together as a team. So if you support what I'm doing, if you value the input of, a dissident voice, if you will, if you think that even if you don't necessarily like my tone or like my point of view, that it's necessary and helpful to get something else out there, that's what you're doing when you're sharing, when you're liking. Again, I'm not asking for your money, just asking for 30 seconds to a minute of your time to get it out there. The program is not self-sustaining. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to color it anything different. There is a cost. I don't complain about the cost because that was fixed. It was baked into the deal from the beginning, and it's minimal. And it's not a burden, but it's not nothing. I find a value in doing this. I find that this feedback, this encouragement, this other view is worthy of my investment. I only hope enough of you feel the same to continue to help me grow the show. And again, that's all I'm asking for. All right, so before I go any further, again, as I said, like, share, subscribe, do your part. So here we go on with the program. All right, so part of the cheerleader mode that we have here is we got to deal with the idea that we can only do so much. It is not up to us to win the battle, but it is up to us to show up for the battle. It is up to us to do our part. It is up to us to just be involved. Now, what does that look like? It requires that we go in knowing what our part is, knowing that there is a sacrifice. It may be time, it may be energy. For some folks, it may be money. For other folks, it might just be a little bit of reading, a little bit of understanding what's at play. Everybody has their own threshold, their value that they're willing to contribute. Far be it for me to criticize somebody that literally only has 20 cents or literally only has an hour a year. I mean, granted, those are extreme examples, but I want to encourage you to do more. I want to encourage you to be more involved. I want to encourage you to help us build an army. And if I come in and badmouth you and dismiss you and say that what you're doing isn't enough or it's weak or it's detrimental, if I'm always negative all the time, your first response, and rightfully so, would be go pound sand. On the flip side of that, I want to say every little bit helps. Everything that you do does make a difference. Every little investment now pays a dividend later. Well, why do you say that? What do you know? Well, I started doing this roughly, I guess, 3 years ago. And I was a voice in the wilderness, right? On any given day, I might have a half a dozen to a couple dozen downloads. Now, granted, we're not going to dwell on the downloads, but just so you understand, that's all I had to work with. And I figured if I was reaching 30 people, that was really great. Come to find out later that that's greatly underestimated and not at all accurate. But be that as it may, speaking into the wilderness and you have no feedback, you don't know what's going on, but you're trying to stay overall positive, but warning of the problems and discussing the shortcomings and not being afraid to take on tough issues. There are a lot of issues that aren't completely cut and dry. There are a lot of issues that even we conservatives, we Christians might have a difference of opinion or a difference of application or a difference of approach. That's all fine and dandy, but we have to remember we're still nominally on the same team. If you follow history at all, and I do, and you look back at what went on when we were involved in World War II, and again, when I was in middle school and I guess to a degree in high school, this was my favorite part of history. This is the thing I spent the most amount of time reading about or looking into. So at the time, I had a very good grasp on how a lot of things went, but I didn't go into all the gory details. I liked looking at the bigger picture. And one of the takeaways was you have a couple of generals that saw advantage to doing different things. One, to make themselves look good, right? To give them a name, but two, to protect their men, to advance and to be aggressive. And aggressiveness and attacking is its own form of defense, right? Because you're putting the other team on their heels. You're forcing them to adapt to your constant offense. Now you're asking, well, what does that matter? How does that work? Well, because everybody does things differently, right? So that Monty and Patton were going back and forth, but there was another general there that wasn't involved in any of that, and he had an entirely different tactic. And so you got the hammer and anvil strategy of hard push and hold the line here, that kind of thing. And again, big picture, you don't necessarily see it unless your name's Eisenhower and you're looking at everything on a board. But we, as little peons, foot soldiers, maybe even as high as a lieutenant or something in this scenario, we only can see what they put in front of us. We understand the mission as they've explained it to us. Perhaps it's detrimental, if you will, that we know more detail than was absolutely necessary. Now, for me personally, I always would say, I want to know what the end goal is. What are we looking to achieve here? I'm happy to do what you want. I just want to understand what is it we're trying to achieve. Because I might have some ideas, or I might have a probable solution or a little different take on it, which I'll run by for your approval, but I just want to understand what's going on here. So when I look at that, I don't want to beat up on somebody that doesn't have any interest in that or only wants to worry about their little piece of the puzzle. Not everybody's me, not everybody's you. Everybody's got their own way, but we have to be working towards the same outcome, the same goal. Maybe they only have a scope of interest or a scope of influence that is 2 or 3 people. Well, guess what? Realistically, most of us don't have more than that, where people are really, truly motivated to do what you say or take on what you think. I mean, there are people that had vastly larger audiences that could be motivated to do things that you normally wouldn't do. If you doubt me, look at the Operation Chaos of 2008. Rush Limbaugh advocated that good, solid Republicans would go vote in the Democrat primary to create disorder. Now, how many people actually did that? Quite a few, actually. Did it sow the seeds of the disorder they were looking for? Well, yeah, I guess in a way. Did it have the ultimate outcome that he was looking for? I don't know. And he's not even here to ask anymore. But there was a guy that was hugely influential and did affect the outcome of several primaries. Now, if you look at, today's day and age, we have the Donald, right? Donald Trump says, this is good, this is bad, and people follow. They flock. And I don't know so much that it's because they have implicit trust in him. It's they see themselves as part of something bigger, that they acknowledge they're part of a team and they have a goal. Some people, the goal is just flipping the finger at the establishment. Some people look at it as a way to fight back. Some people legitimately believe we're going to be able to drain the swamp. This is all fine and dandy because they're all moving in the same general way. And they're following the lead of none other than the Donald Trump. Sorry, it is Trump. Don't think he's a chump. But that being said, this is a guy who commands an army whether he intends to or not. That can be good or bad. I do find it ironic that the progressive leftist Democrats are freaking out about the end of quote unquote democracy and how they're going to lock up all the dissidents. It's as if they've not been paying attention for the last 3.5 years. It's as if that they completely ignore the destruction that's been wrought upon these United States. Now, granted, most of them are actually okay with it and think it's a good outcome, but they think anything less than that or the reverse of it would be terrorizing. Again, why do I bring that up? Just to say that our battle is bigger than us. Our battle is bigger than what we see in front of us. The reason why the battle belongs to the Lord is because we're not battling strictly against flesh and blood. We're not battling about dealing with those individuals that we can see before us. There are other things at foot. There's other things at play. There's other things that we need to acknowledge and deal with. And ultimately, our winning or losing is not under our control. But we do have a job to do. We have a certain expectation that we're going to go accomplish these things. Let's transition this to the idea, and I have touched on this in the past, but it's directly related. We're told to occupy. And when you hear the term occupy, if you're thinking in a military point of view, that puts you in a different frame of mind than maybe what this is referring to. The idea, if you're occupying, is you're involved, you're present, you're engaging, you're taking part in the society around you that you are impacting. Now, in my church, once upon a time, we had this 4 things, right? And one of them was impact others, right? If you're not impacting others, if you're not influencing others, if you're not engaging with others, what are you doing? Now, I would say to you that everybody does this, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But if you intentionally choose to do it in a way that is positive, if you're intentionally looking to accomplish a goal, you're going to do a much better job of doing that overall, in my opinion. Now, what does that look like? Well, it's going to be different for everybody. And again, this goes back to the first point, right? or I guess not the first point, but the first aside. I can't make that decision for you. It's not my role to judge what you're doing or not doing. Now, if you're doing nothing, yeah, okay, fine. That's fair. You're doing nothing here. You're not useful. But if you're doing something, even if I don't understand it, or even if I, quote, don't think it's enough, something is better than nothing, as long as it's working towards the goal. There are things that you can be doing that are detrimental. There are things that you can do that dissuade others or push people away or cause people to disengage because they just don't want to be involved. They don't want to be a part of that. And I would submit to you that maybe a lot of our people need to check themselves on that. If you're that arrogant jerk that nobody wants to deal with, if you're the one that's always right and holds it over everybody's head and lords over your opinion over everybody else's and they know nothing, perhaps you're the problem. If you look at everybody that's different from you by 10% or 5% is your mortal enemy, as opposed to the leftist progressive socialists that want to destroy our country, perhaps you have misplaced priorities. I'm just saying. Again, the battle belongs to the Lord. Our enemies we do not see, but the people that we work with, the people that we team with, are on our team. They are part of the solution if we will just look at it that way. And the reason why I say that is we have to be willing to take possession, right? If you're occupying, you're engaged. But if you're taking possession, now what do I mean by that? Well, this is a little tricky. This is kind of an extrapolation, if you will, on my part. You need to take possession, and not like absolute control and nothing else, but possession meaning this ownership, right? You have to take and engage your family, your community, your job, your friends, your relatives, you have to take possession of that. You need to own it. You need to make it a part of who you are, but you also need to make sure that those people understand who you are and what you're bringing to the table, what you're engaging with them over and what you were looking to get done. I had a conversation with somebody earlier this week, and we just related the idea that you don't want to be the guy that everybody says whenever they see, oh, he never shuts up about this, or oh, he's always talking about that. Now, I got to admit, in my younger years, I did kind of get painted a little bit like that. I have since taken the tactic, and I tell my wife this because she's quite cautious of me turning people off. I said, no, look, first of all, if I'm just meeting people, I'm the nicest guy they're going to meet. I won't say anything. I won't do anything that's the least bit controversial. I'm just a nice guy. I said, now our family and friends, they know better. I mean, there's a certain responsibility there. They know me well enough that if I'm going to lean into them. But the other thing is when we're in social gatherings, especially with people that we know, and we all have our friends that don't align with us, right? We all have that guy that's the token squish or the token lefty, or maybe they're just a burnout that never grew up or an old hippie. You don't hate these people, but you just kind of know what they are. And you kind of agree to disagree, and you don't bring it up. So I've always told my wife, well, we're going to go in the social gathering. We're going to be with people. I'm not going to be the one that brings it up. I don't go, to church settings or social gatherings and talk politics. Now, if somebody brings it up, absolutely, I'll engage. I'll talk. We'll try and have a nice, even-handed discussion. Maybe I'll elaborate why this is a better idea than that, but I'm not going to go hostile. Not going to be rude. Just have a friendly discussion. That's my general course of action. But I'm not going to be the one to bring it up. I'll engage. I'll participate. I'll make it lively if they'll let me. I mean, look, some of it depends on who your audience is and who's engaging, right? But you got to read the room, and you got to know what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So if you're always that guy that's walking in that people run the other way, perhaps you're detrimental. Now, there's also two different kinds of detrimentals, right? There's the guy that's perceived as being detrimental because he disagrees with you or other people, but he's completely pleasant, good interactor, nice and communicative. But people see them as detrimental because that person's effective. We don't want them to talk. We don't want them involved because they might convince somebody else. We need to keep them away from this. That's true too. But I might submit to you that that's more often than not the exception to the rule, because we all know the person that just cannot stop. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It doesn't matter if it's political or apolitical. They just go off on a tangent and they go on and on and on and on. And just so you know, at times that's me. Fortunately, my wife gives me an elbow or a knee or just a little look. Shut up. You're talking too much. Yeah, okay. I think all of us can be guilty of that from time to time, especially if it's something we're particularly passionate about. But there are other folks that they just fixate on this one or two things that are uber important and they can't let go. They can't let anything else happen. They won't let anything deviate from the conversation. And you absolutely must agree with them or you're wrong. And you're not allowed to have any other interpretation because clearly you're just evil then. Not a net positive. Not a good look. That's what most of it is. Everybody sees them as the exception to the rule. In fact, honestly, if you're trying to pin me down, I'd say, well, more often than not, I am the exception to the rule. But it doesn't mean that I don't fall under the rule, as I just admitted, which is why it's good to have somebody with you that'll reel you in or talk you down or whatever. It's okay. It's not bad. But you have to also recognize that just because you know something doesn't mean that everybody else wants to know that too. All right, now let's return to the original portion of this. The battle belongs to the Lord. So at this point, you're saying, well, Callus, I already interact in 4 clubs. I read books. I talk to my family, and I go to a good church. So I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Great. You're better than a lot of people in that regard then. What else can I do? Well, therein lies the question. It's going to boil down to is what most fits with your philosophy, what most fits with your, let's call it entertaining mode, right? What's culturally appropriate for where you live? These are all important questions. And again, it goes back to, it's not really my job to criticize somebody for not doing what I'm doing, as long as they're doing something. So if you're hosting meet and greets or get-togethers or book clubs, or you're just a friendly person that interacts with people and hands out your business card, you're doing more than what the vast majority of people are doing. That's a good thing. We need people that are willing to come in and talk about issues, yes, but we also need people that are good to come in and talk and get to know people in general. We need people that are willing to build a network of, hey, I know that person, he's a good person, he might be able to help you with this. Or this lady, she's excellent, she might be able to assist you with this. And you build this network, you build these friends, you get this interaction, and then maybe at some point in the future, something questionable comes up and they're like, hey, Stephen, I know this is something that you follow. What do you think about this? What about this Biden conviction thing? Does this mean anything? I mean, that's maybe a longer conversation, so you got to be careful how you answer. But the default answer is, well, you want the short answer or the long answer? Now, most people are going to say, well, just give me the short answer. Okay. So you give them the short answer. And then you say, there's more to it than that, but that's just the simplest and quickest way that I can explain it. Is that good? Is that what you were looking for? And a lot of people will be really gracious and appreciative of that. And I think a lot of our folks don't understand that. Again, it's not our job to change their mind. It's not our job to prove ourselves correct. It's our job to speak the truth. It's our job to demonstrate the right way to do things. It's our job to be active, but it's not our job to ensure the outcome. The battle belongs to the Lord. Now, a lot of you are probably now starting to draw this connection, right, from what you learned in a nice church. It's not your responsibility to get somebody saved, but it is your responsibility to make sure that you sow those seeds. Likewise, in political organizations, if we quit hounding on the idea that we're getting people to be confirmed or we're getting people to swear allegiance to us, but more of we're bringing something to them, We're changing their paradigms. We're bringing them around to seeing things the way that we are, and we're showing them that we're good people. We love them. We want to be interactive. We have something to offer, and they're joining part of a larger community, which is more effective. Who are you going to listen to? The guy that's looking out for people, the guy that wants to help people, the guy that's generous with his time and his interests, or somebody that's just an arrogant jerk that knows it all and doesn't have time of day to explain anything to you at a level that makes sense? Again, while the battle belongs to the Lord, we have to do our part. And yes, I know that conservatism or republicanism or right politics or whatever is not Christianity. I will absolutely grant you that. But I will also say those three things don't exist without Christianity. Those three things don't exist in a vacuum, or at least they won't long term. Now, I know there's some leftist, progressive, socialists out there that claim to follow the Lord. They claim to be Christians. You know what? I don't know their heart. I'm not going to condemn them to hell, but I am going to question whether or not they're actually reading the same Bible I am, or whether or not they're understanding the same precepts that I am. Doesn't mean that my team is always right, because they're clearly not. But it does mean that you have to acknowledge your team has some major, major faults. And maybe, just maybe, you need to find a way to deal with those before you worry about pulling the speck out of the eye of my team. And I'm pretty good at calling out the specks of my own team, if I might say so myself. In fact, probably half of my episodes, 650 or whatever we're at now, are about calling out our own people and our own shortcomings. So, again, you can be even-keeled. You can be measured. You can be objective. You can have good conversations. And you can get it done in quicker than 30 minutes, too. Again, just to wrap it up, the battle belongs to the Lord, but we have to do our part. There is zero expectation that we're going to win the battle if we don't at least pick up the sword or put on the armor, right? You can't expect to get things handed to you. You have to do your part. You have to show up to work today, or you're not going to get a paycheck. You have to actually put together your meal, or you're not going to be able to eat. These are all very simple, understood axioms for most of human society in time memorial, but apparently now that's up for debate as well. In either case, I've said enough for today. I think you got the major takeaway. And look, you have to stay positive. We have to cheer for our team. We have to make it worth engaging. That's something that we could all stand to remember. And with that, this has been According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.